Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic, hoping you're well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which finally sees Avatar: The Way of Water get knocked out of the number one spot, and not just the number one spot, but also never even having a chance at the number two spot. I imagine that a week going by might actually give the film a chance to be able to do so, seeing the two films that did knock it off are films that I don't think will have very strong week two holdings, but again, we'll have to wait and see on those numbers. But still, number two spot, number one spot, not going to Avatar: Way of Water, but instead going to Knock at the Cabin, a new film from M. Night Shyamalan, or as I like to call him, Shyamalana Ding Dong, and a film called 80 for Brady, which seems to be about 80-year-olds who are very thirsty for Tom Brady, is what I'm gathering from the trailer at the very least for the movie. And hey, guess what? If that's the kind of film that appeals to you, then hey, more power to you, I guess. But hey, all I could say is that it'll be nice being able to talk about a couple of movies that aren't Avatar 2: The Way of Water. But we will have to, of course, bring up everyone's favorite subject, which drives everyone crazy, even still to this very day, which of course is the subject of inflation, because they are once again pushing more fake news, fake nonsense about how Avatar 2 has now sailed past the Titanic overseas record of number 3 of all-time offshore charts. But that's, of course, without adjusting for inflation, which is something that is very, very important. It's not the end-all, be-all. It's not the perfect system, but it is one of the best things that we actually have. And for those people who are going to try and say, hey, man, why haven't you been talking about inflation with any other films? Oh, wait a minute. If you go to my website and you go down for a little bit, you say, wait a minute, I actually did a full breakdown of all the Star Wars movies, and wait, I adjusted for inflation. Oh, and that was actually about couple years ago that I did that. Oh, wait a minute. I have actually all the Marvel films too. The last update I gave to that one, by the way, was July 31st of 2022. Oh, that's interesting. Wait, I also did all the DC films. Wait. Oh, I've poked a hole in your narrative. Seems that many of you just decided just to ignore the fact that I have a website where I break these things down and have been breaking these things down and have been bringing inflation into the equation since the very beginning. But hey, that's what happens when a bunch of troll comments come out of the way to try to attack me for my displeasure with the film. But not only just that, but also my displeasure with mainstream Hollywood media, which tends to, again, push these narratives all to try to get a bunch of clicks onto their website. For those who are going to say I'm doing the same thing, the difference is that I'm actually pointing out to facts, whereas for them, they are giving, facts to their situation. And if that triggers you, hey, I'm happy. Anyway, before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, that fire button if you're watching over, and smash the rumble button as well. Lord knows there's going to be a lot of hate given to this video just by the very fact that I've even mentioned the word inflation, which triggers people to no end. But let's go ahead and dive into the actual numbers themselves, because the numbers themselves are what they are, and it's very hard to spin them one way or the other. So we look at the first film. The number one film of the week for the domestic market is Knock at the Cabin, making $14.2 million. And even with that being the case, it's interesting that Avatar: Way of Water's per theater ratio is still actually stronger than the number 2 film of 80 for Brady, and not really too far off from that of Knock at the Cabin. And if I had to guess, seeing that Avatar: Way of Water is continuing to have very strong holds from week to week, it would not surprise me if by next week Avatar is making yet another, $8 to $10 million domestically, and then you see Knock at the Cabin, 80 for Brady, getting their numbers cut probably in half, meaning Avatar probably gets back to the number 1 or the number 2 spot. Yet you will probably still have people who didn't actually watch this video, but rather looked at the title, looked at the thumbnail, and then we'll come back in a week and say, you were talking about how the movie was Again, this is just what happens when you deal with a bunch of people who have some type of psychosis and obsession with a film that is not real, that is not based in reality, and is still from Hollywood. And also, by the way, as just yet a constant reminder, has given hundreds of millions of dollars to the Communist Party. And yes, I've called out MCU and DCU films as well for doing the same exact thing, but hey, that's what happens when you just come around to add in a bunch of troll comments rather than actually trying to engage with the material itself. Anyway, going into the rest of it, we have 80 for Brady making $12.5 million. So, hey, some decent numbers there for that movie, though ultimately that film cost $28 million to make, which just seems a little bit too high to make it, though. It makes sense seeing that they are having and featuring some what looks to be either archived football footage or brand new football footage. They're obviously getting some football players in. Lord knows they probably come with a pretty high price tag, so it makes sense that the film would actually cost a little bit higher, but will it be able to return on its investment? That remains to be seen. A film that has absolutely returned on its investment and then some is a film called Avatar: The Way of Water, making another $10.8 million, bringing sold domestic to $636.4 million. This is a movie that I have been tracking, especially looking at the comparables of this between it and Top Gun Maverick's domestic, because right now we're looking at a situation where this film had a much higher, stronger starting point versus Top Gun Maverick, but Top Gun Maverick has had a stronger down the line per day reporting, even in the weekend numbers, not just in the daily numbers, but in the weekend numbers too. And so the real question that I have is going to be, is this film going to be able to get to $700 million domestically? I think it's a possibility. And if it does, will it be able to make that extra 18 plus million that it would need to either match or exceed the total domestic of what we found with Top Gun Maverick? I think it's definitely possible, but it's definitely looking like it's going to be a battle to the very end as these numbers continue to come in. We also have Puss in Boots coming in now in its 7th week of release, continuing to also be in the top 5, being bumped from the number 2 spot finally. Again, this film has been number 2 for a couple weeks now. This film doing very well, another 24% drop, $7.9 million. So as you can see, no change in theaters. So Universal very much having a lot of confidence in it, whereas Avatar: Way of Water obviously being out for an extra week, you're starting to see this film get pulled. And do not be surprised if you don't see the same thing happen in the next coming weeks, especially with major films, right, with major budgets behind them set to come out. I'm looking especially at Ant-Man Quantumania. Even though I think the film looks like complete trash, it's going to bring in a lot of money, and so I think because it's going to bring a lot more direct competition within the same the same types of persons that go to see films like Avatar: Way of Water, right, where it comes to as far as just the certain demographics, especially the age demographics. It'll be interesting to see exactly what kind of drop-offs we see, but I imagine that they'll probably want to reallocate resources to that movie and take away some of the theaters from Avatar, seeing that the film is already made well over $2 billion worldwide. Not that they really need that much more money with it, but they will continue to make a little bit more money. We'll talk about the full extent of what I think the film probably will end up being by the end of its run internationally once we get to the full breakdown there. Right now in the number 5 spot is A Man Called Otto. So again, still also hanging around, but looking at losing some theaters here after 6 weeks of release. A film called After Sun, which has been out for, says 16 weeks here. I actually haven't really even heard of that movie. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever as well is still out technically, making $218,000 right now. This film is seeing a little bit of a rebirth when you look at the international numbers, and so again, it'll be interesting to see exactly where that film ends up when all is said and done there. But it is going to be, again, the China release that's going to be, I think everyone's going to be looking to, because this film has been out for quite a while, for 13 weeks. The film is also on Disney Plus, or at the very least will almost be on Disney Plus. And so the question is going to be, will there be enough people in China who actually have any desire to go see this film that long after its initial release? I have some doubts about that, and I don't think it's going to be able to pull this film up to, anything really past the $850 to $900 million mark. But again, 850 is where I said that the ceiling for this movie is prior to China. With China, maybe you're looking at $900 million as being the cap there, but we'll have to wait and see once we start getting those China numbers in and we can start to break those things down. We also have other films like Plane making another $2.8 million, not making too much else internationally, so not looking like international market's going to come in to save this movie. The film Missing as well made its money back, as did Megan, and so these films are starting to lose out as was expected. The Chosen Season 3, some people are big fans of The Chosen. I have just never gotten into it, so hey, $3 million there at 1,000 screens, $2,000 per screen. Pretty decent numbers there when compared to some of the other higher films there. Infinity Pool is dropping out like a leaf. It just seems like it's a very bizarre film that not a lot of people are being drawn to. I have not really heard a lot of good things about it myself, and so I will probably stay away from it. Everything Ever All at Once got a re-release because of the Oscar contention and other awards contention. I would say more importantly, some Ravens contention, and if you've not voted in this year's Raven Awards, check out the top link in the video description below to be able to get those votes in. And then you have a bunch of other films down here as well. Looking at the individual releases, Knock at the Cabin's $21.2 million. You have my review out on the channel. I don't think this film is all that good. If you've seen the trailer for the movie, you've seen the movie. There really isn't anything as far as actual surprises in the movie. Nothing that really, I think, is shocking. Everything that happens is basically explained to you and spoon-fed to you story-wise. So I think that the film overall fails on that because, yes, it's not as bad as the film Old, because Old was just all over the place and just a hot mess. Whereas this film, it's just, again, a movie that could have been probably a lot better had it left you guessing, had it actually had a mystery to it. Whereas with this one, it's just very much, no, here's what's going on. We're being honest with you. Oh, by the way, here's our proof of it. We're going to show you what's happening on the television screen. And so therefore, it just doesn't leave you with any questions or any guesses whatsoever, and ultimately it falls flat, and it's just yet another example of how M. Night has fallen so far from grace. You also have 80s for Brady. Women thirsty for Tom Brady is how I like to describe this film. $12.5 million domestic there, so who knows? Avatar: Way of Water to $2.1 billion. Right now, I'm thinking this film probably, as I said, I think the ceiling was $2.5 billion. Right now, I'm thinking actual realistically, $2.2 billion seems to be right on the horizon. So I'm thinking $2.3, $2.4 billion likely end result here. And I think $2.5 billion might now be off the table, seeing that it's made the vast majority of its money, and it's going to start to have some actual competition from much bigger releases coming in with the end of February. And then really when you have end of February, you have several releases in March, and then you have, of course, the build up to the summer movie season. And so I think that this film is mostly done making the bulk of its money, but will still continue to make money. What we can say for sure, though, is again, it gave about $200 million or so to the Communist Party of China. And just like we've had also with Puss in Boots giving a little bit, only about $6 million to China, both of these films are part of studios that do works with China. And I think any studio that does so, and Disney, I think, is probably one of the worst offenders of it, including also Universal, Warner Brothers, that they should always be called out, because this money ain't going to the people of China. It's rather coming from the people of China, and it's going straight into the pockets of the CCP. And so that's hundreds of millions of dollars that they otherwise would not have had access to had these films not been released there. And also, this film's success could have easily happened even without coming from China, where they only get 25% of the receipts. And again, it does not make any sense for Hollywood to do business there, unless, of course, it is that they maybe have a little bit of a too much buddy relationship with the Communist Party there. Looking at the right now, the fight going on domestically, as I mentioned earlier. In this segment, I had talked about how there is this really interesting fight going on to the domestic numbers of Top Gun Maverick versus the domestic numbers of Avatar: Way of Water. As you can see, $636 million is where currently Avatar: Way of Water is. At the same point in release, $618 million is where Top Gun Maverick was. But what's interesting is, as you can see, not only, of course, is the film's daily numbers, right? So if you look at the Monday numbers here, right, all victories for Top Gun Maverick, edging out the film, sometimes even doubling what doubling what Avatar 2 had done at the same point in its release. This, of course, does make sense, seeing that this came out over the summer. But again, what kind of fights against that narrative a little bit is the fact that you look at those Friday numbers. So yes, it's over a summer, but it's also still a Friday. It's still able to edge it out. You do have the Saturday numbers where it was able to make up some grounds there, right? The Avatar numbers were able to catch up a little bit. But then you look at the fact that it's also still beating it on the Sunday. So you're looking at the weekends either being a wash or a slight edge to Top Gun Maverick. The weekdays, clear wins for Top Gun Maverick. And so you're basically seeing Top Gun Maverick slowly start to get to the point where these films are almost getting neck and neck. And so that's why the ultimate question is, will there be enough in the tank, especially in the midst of more actual competition coming out domestically and internationally from other films set to come out in the next few weeks? Will there be enough left in the tank for Avatar to push itself to $700 million domestically, or even past that to the $718 million that was made by Top Gun Maverick? That is, I think, one of the best comparables right now that we can look to, and it's an interesting battle to say the very least, and it'll be interesting to see where things end up when all is said and done. Puss in Boots, as I had mentioned, does give a little bit of money to China, but the vast majority of it is not out of it, and so it's not out of China, and so $350 million there, pretty impressive. Man Called Otto is continuing to hang around there. The film Megan also not really adding a whole lot. It's pretty much made the vast majority of its money at this point in time. $100 million domestically might still be on the table, but it will have to kind of squeeze it out just to get there. The film Missing, which just borrowed from the previous film from the same directors and same creators in Searching, which just does not seem like all that impressive of a movie or of a story, because it just seems to, again, rob from the previous material to such a degree where it's like, I don't see the difference really between the two films, at $23 million domestically at this point in time. So still has made its money back and made a little bit of profit. The Chosen Season 3 finale, $5.3 million. Pretty impressive numbers there for a film that is based on a TV series, or rather that is the end of a TV series season. Plane at $35 million. As you can see, not really a whole lot coming from the international markets, and so probably not enough to make its money back, but I think it still has a couple of markets to open in, so we'll have to wait and see. And then the film Infinity Pool at $4.3 million doesn't seem to be all that impressive. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever going here to Box Office Mojo, as this has the higher number between the two, between it and the numbers, and so I always try to give as fair of a metric as I possibly can to try to, of course, avoid the trolls who will continue to troll as they tend to do. But this film, $842 million, looking like $850 million being that, again, that ceiling that I'd said was from the very beginning, for several weeks now, likely is going to be able to play out. But this, of course, without anything coming necessarily from China yet, at least I believe so. I know that's going to be getting released in China very, very soon. Yeah, right now, no numbers showing from there. So once that actually does come out in China, that's going to be the big question, is how much will it be able to make this far out from its initial release, where people have probably had a chance to watch it and find out all about how bad the movie actually is. Going into the box office charting, because we love to do some box office charting here on the website. And again, check out those other charts if you want to see the adjusted for inflation numbers for all the MCU films and DC films, which I've also called out in the past. But again, a lot of new people on the channel who probably just don't know that, and so all they know about me is, hey, this is the guy that keeps talking about Avatar. Well, because I talk box office and it was the #1 film for the longest time, no more. I think it actually has a good chance of being able to get back into the top 3, or rather back into the top 2, but we'll have to wait and see what kind of drop-offs we see for Knock at the Cabin and 80 for Brady. So Knock at the Cabin at a $20 million budget, so that means that the break-even point is around $50 million. Right now, it's $17.2 million in the red. So I think even though the film is not very good, I think that there might still be enough fans of the genre and fans of him in general that might be able to push the film to making $50 million at the very least. We'll wait and see what the week 2 numbers are. Again, as you all know, I base a lot of my numbers off the first 2 weeks. Can't say the same for 80 for Brady, because this film cost $28 million to make, meaning its break-even is closer to $70 million. So a $12.5 million start means the film's $34.5 million in the red. So this will also be one that I'll watch to see what kind of drop-off we see. But ultimately, I don't know exactly at this point whether it's going to have enough gas in the tank to push it to its break-even point, but it'll be interesting to follow nonetheless. Adding the money that it did is now at $3 million in the black. The film Plane still $12.5 million in the red, so the international market is helping it a little bit, but not as much as it needs to at this point in time. Megan at $75 or almost $75 million in the black. Not too surprising there to see those numbers. Puss in Boots, $82 million in the black at this point in time. Maybe has a chance of pushing it out to $100 million, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. $2.1 billion for Avatar Way of Water puts it at $614 million in the black. So again, both of these films very much chart breakers in their own right. As you can see just from the numbers here, 41% versus its first 2 weeks. 37% versus his first 2 weeks. So Puss in Boots is definitely performing better percentage-wise week to week, even though the total number, obviously, Avatar Way of Water is definitely dominating that overall story. When you look at films like Megan and when you look at films like Plane, these are also films that are definitely starting to get, again, above the average as far as their performance week to week is concerned, which it definitely is, I think, a positive sign for it. But in the midst of more competition on the way very, very soon, it's going to be interesting to see where those movies end up when all is said and done. The last number really to update is Black Panther Wakanda Forever, $130 million in the black, still 65% compared to its first 2 weeks, so still well below the average of what most films have. And again, the film not being all that good doesn't surprise me all that much that the film is there, but that China piece will ultimately, I think, be an interesting factor, because though I don't think it's going to add a crap ton of money to it, it definitely will add a little bit of money. And so will it be able to push it to $900 million? I think that is a possibility, but remember, that's going to be post what I've said previously without the China release. And so those numbers, of course, will have to have, again, one of those little asterisks next to it. And also, of course, remind ourselves that any of the money it makes, 75% of it will go to fund the CCP. But these are the numbers as they stand. What are y'all's thoughts? Are you surprised that Knock at the Cabin, and not just Knock at the Cabin, but 80 for Brady, were actually able to knock Avatar 2 off of its high horse at the #1 spot? As I said, though, based on the fact that this film is seeing very, very small drops, and I project these films to have probably 40 to 60+% drops in their second weeks of release, I would say Avatar Way of Water actually has a good chance of not getting to the #2 spot, possibly even to the #1 spot once again next weekend. But of course, we'll have to wait and see exactly what films that we have coming up. In fact, I'll go ahead and pull that up at this point in time, just so that we have a pretty good idea. Right now, we're at this week, right, 80 for Brady. So coming out next weekend with everything, we have Magic Mike's Last Dance. So hey, Magic Mike's Last Dance, maybe that film will end up being the #1 or #2 film. So maybe it will keep maybe it will keep Avatar 2 out of the box office. After that, you then have films like Marlowe and then Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So as I said, you do have some bigger films like Ant-Man especially coming out, Cocaine Bear coming out after that. That might be able to pull some money away, and it'll be interesting to see where these films fall when all is said and done. But what are y'all's thoughts about this? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, smash the rumble button, and light up that fire button on Odyssey. Also check out the pinned comment below if you want to vote in this year's Wednesday Raven Awards to vote for the best and the worst of film in 2022, as well as in pop culture coverage as well. You can vote for people like Jeremy Geeks and Gamers as Shill of the Year. You can also vote for people like Frost for NPC of the Year, and many others like it. You actually have Best Film of the Year with people like, films like Top Gun Maverick in the mix. Even Avatar Way of Water, there was a contingent strong enough to get the nominations for it. So it'll be interesting to see where that film falls in the ranked choice voting that I have for that going on, where it is you rank the films 1 to 8. So if you want to check that out, link in the top, link in the video description, and also more specifically in the top pinned comment above. Anyway, you guys are all amazing. Have a wonderful day, a blessed Septuagesima Sunday, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Patreon, locals, and Subscribestar members who are at the Keeper the Bifrost level and above, starting off with Father Luca Illich, Garrett Searles, Chris from the 80s, who you can check out over on YouTube by the same name, Hymir Hymason, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange at Reviews, who you can check out at his YouTube channel by the same name as well, Laura, the Modern Major General Story, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel, Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, which goes by the same name on YouTube. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on Patreon. And also for my Subscribestar peeps, we got Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name. Fast Reaction, Mr. Roy, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And also lastly to my locals members, starting off with Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, Brett D90, and the amazing lawyer Robert Barnes. Thank you all very much for supporting me for the month of February. You guys are all fantastic. If you want your name shouted out, access to exclusive podcasts, and exclusive giveaways, check out the top link in the video description below. Anyway, you guys are all great. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. And as always, God bless.